Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. Today for you, I wanted to talk about, of course, one of the #1 topics in the world right now, which is Tiger King. I've watched this documentary probably about 5 times all the way through. I'm just so infatuated with all the angles of the story. So, the main reason for this video is because I want to focus on Tiger King episode 3 called The Secret. Of course, one of the big things that come out of this is everybody talking about Carole Baskin and the whole case with her husband. So, being a fan of a lot of crime shows, I had thought, because even Doc Antle says this in the documentary, it sounds so crazy that it can't be true. And a lot of the times I find in those shows that those are a lot of the time that's the case. That it is so crazy that it ends up being true. So I sat and watched this episode and I took notes. I took about probably 4 pages worth of notes. And then I feel like the way it's presented in the documentary, it's a little bit out of order. So I thought maybe, could the answer or the story be there in Tiger King, but maybe we just have to piece it together. This is just what I'm saying. This is just a theory. I don't know Carole Baskin or anything like that. I'm not trying to say anything about her character or anything like that. I'm just looking at it from an outside perspective. Before we start talking about Carole's missing husband, it's easier to kind of paint a picture of both of these people separately, like prior to them getting married and this whole thing happening. So first, I want to start off with Don real quick. Don was a millionaire. He was married at a very young age, and he had kids at a very young age. Don is described as always having other women, so yeah, probably a ladies' man. And he was also described as a sex addict. So right there you can pretty much see that that's probably his biggest problem with his character, I would say, is that he could be perceived as like a sex fiend. Other than that, I think Don was probably a great guy from what the documentary says. I don't know for sure, but I'd like to move on to Carole, just to kind of talk about her for a second. Carole was allegedly raped at the age of 14. At the age of 15, she left home. She got married to her first husband at age 17, and it says that multiple times, pretty much her whole life, Carole had nothing. And that's one thing to keep in mind that I'm going to kind of reinforce in this video. So now I want to kind of rehash the story a little bit based on the interviews and the stories that we are told within the documentary. Forgive me for reading my notes, but I want to make sure I get everything accurately, and I'm probably going to mess up if I don't. January 1981. Carole is 20 at the time, and she meets Don, who is 42. Don is married with kids. Carole is married with a child. I'm not sure if she had the child at that point, but probably not soon after. She had a child with her current husband that she was messing around on with Don. So Carole was 20 when she met Don, and 24 before she left her abusive husband to be with Don. Both had affairs on their respected partners for about 4 years while they were both in their respected marriages with each other. Light was shown by several close people that Don and Carole were having problems over the direction of their sanctuary, and Don having a girlfriend in Costa Rica. That's going to play into it a little bit later, but I'm just kind of putting some things out there to kind of paint more of a picture of their relationship together, which is what you really have to look at in these situations. In June, Don files a restraining order on Carole for threatening to kill him and taking and hiding his pistol. Don disappears in August. Don is last seen by Carole August 18th. He is reported missing August 19th at 1:30 p.m. No evidence is found on the search of their property. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind with mysteries and these crime shows is that normally when there's a missing person, they will tell you the first 24 to 48 hours are the most crucial part of the investigation. So the fact that within the first day or so of him being missing, they find nothing, which is really odd. I don't think Don took off or was missing. I think something definitely happened to him. 3 to 4 days later, Don's van is found at an airport with a briefcase and keys left inside. Police suspect it was either driven by somebody else or planted there by somebody else. And according to one of Don's close friends, after the van is discovered, he feels like the evidence was mistreated. He said that the van was moved and sat for days before any inspection was done. So from the beginning, that indicates that the case was not handled properly by the police at first. And normally, like I said, in these shows, you find out that that's usually some kind of key, something missing. I personally believe that Carole knew of Don going to Costa Rica to ship cars and saw this as an opportunity to stage his disappearance and eventual death. 5 years after Don's disappearance, Carole has him legally declared dead. Prior to this, Carole and her father had taken his will. She essentially changed everything so that she would keep the cats, the sanctuary, money, house. Carole received at least 90% of Don's estate and left the other 10 to his daughters. That may not be accurate. That's just according to his ex-wife and his kids, that Carole, that's how much they probably roughly got out of his entire estate, which they say in the documentary, Don was probably, I want to say at most, worth like about $10 million. With that being said, I do believe that Carole did something, or definitely had something to do with Don's disappearance. And one of the things that I would like to point out that the documentary shows, but I feel like if it was Carole, she went through a lot of lengths to create misdirection as to what happened to him. And here I have some examples, so forgive me again for reading notes, but I just want to make sure I give it to you accurately. Here are the two examples I believe were misdirection on Carole's part from what they told us in the case on the documentary. Example 1. For some time, Carole was claiming that Don had memory loss, behavior problems due to a plane crash Don experienced prior to his disappearance. Multiple associates of Don claimed this was false and nothing was off about him. So, really, in the documentary, you have people, multiple people who were actually close and saw him with his last few days that he was seen, saying that there was nothing wrong with him. And the thing I want to say about Carole with this accusation or story that she comes up with, you hear her at one point say that a volunteer of the sanctuary had come up to her and spoken to her about that. I would get that person as a witness to verify what they were saying, because it just sounds like that wasn't looked into. But also her creating this, notion that he's kind of off or something's wrong with him, people aren't going to look to her first. They're going to believe her because that's his wife, but like I said, according to Don's associates, there was nothing wrong with him, and up until the time he disappeared, he was, as sharp or witty as he normally was. So there, I feel like that's just Carole creating doubt. My second example is his van being discovered. Don's flying license had been suspended or taken away, and when the van was located, those planes were too small to have made it to Costa Rica. So, with the van being planted there, creating misdirection, giving the idea that, hey, maybe Don took off, but they even say in the documentary that the police looked into it and it would have taken multiple trips. The plane was too small. He could not have done it or had it arranged. So again, for it to pop up 3 to 4 days after that is suspicious and, like I said again, creates misdirection because you don't associate it at all with Carole. You think, oh, well, that definitely looks like he may have gotten in a plane and just left. Which was indicated by a few of his associates that they felt like that's what it seemed like he was going to do. And he may have, but I feel like something happened to him before that. And with those two things of misdirection, it completely takes the focus off of Carole and puts it strictly on Don's character, which up until this point and as of overall, we only really know that he wasn't that bad of a guy. Here I have a little bit of a theory, or I question the van. And here's what I had thought of. Like I said, piecing parts of the story together. The night of Don's disappearance, Carole went to the grocery store at 3 a.m. to get milk product for the cats. Her car broke down and Carole's brother, who was a police officer, helped her by having his partner drive Carole home. So I wonder if this could have been Don's van that she had taken to the store, and so it would have given Carole an alibi and a chance for Carol's brother to take the van, which was not discovered until days later, because it says that her brother was not dropped off, but he let the partner take the car to take Carole home. So he was there by himself. And I wonder, I mean, she claims that they're not close, but if his involvement as a police officer, he would have the resources, especially during the timing of it, to essentially make the van disappear, because they don't say anything else about it afterwards. But that's just a theory of mine, and it's a question I would like to ask them, what car did Carole drive that broke down? Because was it the same van that was left at the airport to make Don look like he had left? Because the way I see it, it kind of adds up, because, like I said, it could not be the van, but that's something that we would need the details more of. Motivation and theories. So, I'm just going to read this first and then I'll talk about it. I believe Carole killed or had Don killed due to his infidelity and him wanting a divorce, threatening to take away everything she could have never gotten on her own in life. I think Don was killed and fed to his cats in pieces, or he could very well be in the septic tank, or Carol's father, who openly was discussed, hated Don, and her brother could have taken care of it. So going back to the van theory, I feel like maybe Carol's father and brother could have had something to do with it. For one, her brother being a cop. Two, witnesses saying that Carol's father openly disliked Don. But like I said, I definitely think that Carole, maybe by herself, or maybe with her brother and her dad's help, I think one of the three of them definitely had something to do with it. Maybe not her brother, because he's kind of painted that they're astray, but, those are things that we just don't know, that we would have to find out. But like I said, I just feel like Carole definitely had something to do with it. He could be in the septic tank. Her story could be full of crap. I mean, we don't know the validity of that story about, whoever they rented the property to or whatever had already moved in, so it wasn't possible. I mean, you don't know that, and I think that's definitely something that should have been looked at. Just considering that this is a story that really had, no leads, but just a couple of these theories. The next thing I wanted to talk about, I feel like, is very crucial in pointing the finger at Carole. I mean, it could be made out to look that way, but it's the testimonials of Don's friends and associates and stuff like that that really convinced me Carole had to have had something to do with it, because normally, statistically, when people disappear or go missing, it's usually someone very close to that person, their spouse, relative, you know what I mean? It could be any of these people. So the last time Don's ex-wife saw him, he had said he was done and divorcing Carole. She was one of the worst people he had ever met in his life, and she was very dangerous. The next person. The last time Wendell Williams saw Don, he had indicated he was going to tell Carole he wanted a divorce and never saw him again. The last time that Mark McCarthy saw Don, a month or so before his disappearance, Don had said he felt like his life was in danger. Anne McQueen says that Don gave her an envelope with a copy of the restraining order he had against Carole and said if anything happens to give this to the police. I'm not sure if that's the last time that she saw him or not, or if that was just something that had happened at one point, they don't say. But yet again, it's also a witness claiming that this happened. Wendell Williams again claims Don was prepping assets for a divorce where he wouldn't have lost everything. Don thought Carole was only interested in his money. And then the last one that I have is Kenny Farr claims Don would have only left Carole a house and a car. So I feel like Carole had to have had an idea that this was either going to happen, and she either knew or had seen what she was going to get out of it, or she knew that Don, basically what he was going to take away from her. And to me, that seems like the best motivation, is because you have this woman who grew up poor, had some traumatic things happen to her, and then finally meets a guy who's a lot older, has a lot of money, and basically gives her everything that she wants without him asking. And then, due to his infidelity, and I also suspect that she was probably cheating on him as well, that the motivation's right there. That she knew it was coming, and knew that her entire world was about to be taken from her. And what do people do? I mean, it doesn't seem like the best, motivation or the strongest, but it doesn't have to be. People have killed and done things like this over smaller things. So I don't feel like it's too far-fetched that everything we need to know about this story is right there in the documentary. We just have to kind of piece it together and look into it and find out more. In the closing of Don's death, Carole never had a memorial or funeral for him. In 2002, Carole met Howard, and they married in 2004, so they were together for 2 years before they got married. But also in another video that I have seen, it said new information had been released that before Howard, Carole allegedly dated a man and may have lived together at one point. It's indicated that they are. But this man also filed a restraining order against Carole. It was also dismissed. So here you have a husband, and then right after that husband, a boyfriend, lover, whatever you want to call him, right after that, both filing restraining orders against her that look pretty similar. And that's the other thing. With the restraining orders, could her brother have had something to do with them getting dismissed? I mean, I understand legally, like what his attorney was saying, that, it's just kind of word of mouth and you can't do anything. But I would have to think that after a second time, they would have to look into it, but I guess not. I just really feel like all the information in the documentary is there. The story is there. I really strongly believe Carole did it or had something to do with it. I think there is the very small chance that maybe, yes, Dom was getting ready to leave, and then something else, somebody else could have killed him. Who knows? I think there's a very small possibility, but the fact of the matter that since this happened, there has really been no details. The leads they get fall through. Just, you don't ever really have a disappearance this clean. And I think that's what indicates that something had happened, to Don because of Carole, I think, my opinion. But I would like to know, does anybody else have any alternative theories? Do they think that the story is maybe not so cut and dry, or have you read things that you've seen? I really would like to know, so please let me know down below. Thank you for bearing with me. Thanks again, everybody. I appreciate the views. I appreciate everybody sticking around. I can't wait to make another video. Again, I just want to say thank you. I mean, I know times are rough right now. And as always, stay safe out there, and I hope you guys have a great day.